Open up the door, it's Dave!
Yesterday, we saw the most successful launch from SpaceX that we've seen to date. Now, SpaceX has had a long history of doing some great things and being really amazing in terms of having launch vehicles go up, but this was the heaviest vehicle that's ever been launched by mankind. So there's this Starship that they've been working on, and they've had 4 test flights for it to this point, and this was the test flight number 5, but this was the one that was truly the seminal moment. It's the one that had the most success. So they were able to take off Starship, launch it from their base in Texas, and then take the first stage and return it back to the actual launch pad. But not only did they bring it back to the launch pad, they caught it, which is something that's unheard of. They actually had these 2 things sticking out, and it actually caught the spaceship as it came back from space. Pretty cool. And then they went off and they had the second stage that had the capsule on it go over and land in the Indian Ocean. And while you can't really tell exactly what happens, it looks primarily like a success. They were able to reduce the velocity to 0, get it over the ocean, and then basically dump it into the ocean. Now, there was some explosion that happened that we could see on the video, but it's hard to tell what exactly was going on there, what happened with the vehicle, whether it was an explosion that happened because something went wrong, or if it was actually just because of the closeness to the Earth. Hard to say. That'll come out in the coming days. We'll know more about it. But it's just amazing what they were able to do. Now, a couple of other cool things that happened along the way. One is that SpaceX has this Starlink system. It's this massive array of satellites that are in orbit that provide for the ability to communicate in orbit. So they provide for some measure of providing Wi-Fi broadband that allows for connectivity. Now, what's cool about this is that it can be used for very many things. So we heard about Ukraine being able to use it in their war effort and defending themselves. We've heard about using it in different places where there's natural disasters and it can be turned on and you have connectivity. There's also the plan to use it later for things like cell phone service. So you could sign up for cell phone service rather than having a tower, you would be connecting to a satellite. In principle, what they're doing here is they're showing us that Starlink can also be used to give us real-time images from space, which is just remarkable because if you think about the way that space works, if you're taking these rockets and launching them, you're beaming a signal back down to Earth, and then you have to process that signal and distribute it. But by going through Starlink, you're able to send that signal out in real time and get high quality resolution images very quickly and reliably from space. So you got these remarkable images coming back as this Starship was going through space. And one of the coolest images, the second thing I wanted to talk about, was the fact that you could see plasma building up on the outside of Starship. And it becomes this sort of pinkish purple haze that's on the outside of the vehicle. Now, why does this plasma buildup happen? It's actually fairly complex in the sense of physics and what happens. But in its simplest terms, what you're doing is ionizing particles that are generally far apart. Remember that this part of space has very little in the way of particles that are compressed against each other. When you're down here on Earth, on the surface like we are, you get all these particles that are close together. So you have all these particles and they generally react to each other. But in space, they're spread out to a large degree. So when a spaceship coming through at that speed bangs against them in some way, they become ionized. They're emitting electrons because they're compressing against the outside of the spaceship hull. And those electrons then fire off and become visible. And it's really, really a cool effect. And I know I'm oversimplifying it to a large degree, but I just wanted to share with you kind of why it's happening in general. And it's one of those things that just kind of makes you wonder at the mystery of the universe. All these things that we can see and do and kind of the science behind it is really what's exciting. You know, I invite you to think about what that means, what the whole plasma burn means. And in fact, I think in a future video, I might actually talk about what plasma is and sort of what it does. So just kind of cool. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out, and this is just sort of a subtle thing, is that on the underside of the spaceship, they have a bunch of heat tiles. And these are very unlike the heat tiles that were on the space shuttle. This is a whole new polymer that they've created.
What's your point, David?